Welcome to the Freedom to Learn podcast. I'm your host, Ginny Gentles. This season, we're diving into what it means to return education to states, communities, and families. And we're exploring what becomes possible when education is freed from union dominance and federal control. There's so much to celebrate during this National School Choice Week. Governors across the country are opting into the federal scholarship tax credit. If you hadn't heard, starting in 2027, taxpayers can receive dollar-for-dollar tax deductions for contributions of up to $1,700 to approved scholarship granting organizations. And students will be able to use the scholarships for a wide array of eligible K-12 education expenses. Education freedom also continues to expand at the state level. Over 30 states have education savings accounts or private school choice programs. An increasing number of these programs offer universal eligibility. Nearly 4 million children attend over 8,000 charter schools in 45 states, and homeschooling participation is growing by nearly 5% every year and shows no sign of slowing down. The number one state when it comes to education freedom, though, is my home state of Florida. I'm proud to share the Florida school choice story whenever I get the chance, and I'm thrilled that Florida Commissioner of Education Anastasios, or Stasi Kamoutsas, joins us today to talk about Florida's K-12 education accomplishments. In 2019, Commissioner Kamoutsas joined the Florida Department of Education's Office of General Counsel. He then served as Deputy Chief of Staff to Governor Ron DeSantis before stepping into his current role. In today's conversation, we cover Florida's school choice history, myths, and lessons learned, and the commissioner addresses parental rights, the wide array of K-12 policies that are improving academic outcomes, and his priorities for the upcoming year. Commissioner Kamoutsas, welcome to Freedom to Learn.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, Virginia.
Well, we are celebrating National School Choice Week, an annual joyful celebration of all things education freedom. I'd love to hear how you personally define school choice or education freedom.
Well, we fundamentally believe in the value of a parent being empowered. I talk about it all the time. I was raised by a single mother of 3 kids. Oftentimes at the traditional public school system in Miami-Dade County, she was overlooked or she was tossed to the side, or her concerns as it related to my education or my brother and sister's education were often thrown to the wayside. This is a woman that took us home from the hospital at birth, who clothed us, who bathed us, who, obsessed over our futures and making sure that she was providing us the best opportunities possible. And I get it. She wasn't the most sophisticated. She had a high school diploma. She worked the front desk at a doctor's office her entire life, probably never made more than $30,000 in a year. However, she cared about us. She wanted the best educational opportunity, and we are providing parents like her, parents across the state, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their zip code. We are giving them true educational freedom by giving them full flexibility. What is the educational option that works best for their child? Is it a homeschool? Where we have seen in the state of Florida over the past 10 years, it has more than doubled. And now they're able to utilize the scholarship program as well. Whether it's a charter school, where we have record numbers now, over 400,000 students who are attending our charter schools, whether it's a private school, and now you have a scholarship that is allowing you for the first time as a parent to truly see your child's future at a private school where you otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford it. We have over 500,000 students benefiting from that. 1.4 million students in our state, a state that has 2.8 million students total, are benefiting from choice programs. And so that is true educational freedom and empowerment of parents.
Well, Florida was a leader in introducing universal school choice. As you're mentioning, the state leads the nation in choice participation. Those numbers are inconceivable for a state like where I live now, Virginia, where there's something like 5 charter schools. It's amazing how much Florida is a leader on this front. But that didn't just happen, right? Like, would you be able to address kind of the evolution, how this happened over a couple of decades?
Yes, a lot of credit to Governor Bush. I know he had his challenges when he was pushing for the Opportunity Scholarship, where he really had a vision to get to where we're at now. Unfortunately for him, he had a Supreme Court that was not favorable, and there's a famous decision, Bush v. Holmes. It's actually still in existence right now, but we were able to, through the expansion with this governor of the Family Empowerment Scholarship, the remake of the Supreme Court, we actually never drew a challenge from the teachers union like we thought to be able to challenge that scholarship program. In fact, I was recruited to come up here to the general counsel's office when I lived in Miami in 2019, thinking that was going to be a primary piece of litigation that I was going to undertake. It never ended up happening. The biggest lawsuit that I ended up dealing with was keeping schools open during COVID and so many of the other fights that we've taken on. But this is something that Governor Bush really had in mind as his vision. Thankfully, Governor DeSantis agreed, and he campaigned on school choice and giving all children across the board an opportunity at a program that best fits their individualized needs. And so we passed the Family Empowerment Scholarship. It went on to full universal school choice, but year after year, incrementally, there were additional benefits, there were additional expansions offered, more students being covered, we were able to get to the point that we're at now. And now we're seeing that parents across the state are able to utilize every single one of these scholarships to the benefit of their children.
Well, I was the leader of the school choice office at the Florida Department of Education when that Florida Supreme Court decision came in years ago. And it was I wouldn't say sad day. It was kind of a infuriating day, because how can you strike down a school choice program that is designed for students in repeatedly failing schools, giving them an escape, allowing them to have an option, and those parents to have those resources? So that decision, I think, fueled a lot of what then happened, which was this significant expansion over education freedom. We're not going to let that happen. These parents are not going to be robbed of their decision. These children are not going to be robbed of their futures and their opportunity. And it's been really exciting to see what's been happening under Governor DeSantis's leadership. He was celebrating that in a recent State of the State address. He said, "Our universal school choice program works. Families and students have benefited, and the academic bar has been raised throughout the state." So looks like he's celebrating success. How do you define success when it comes to education freedom in Florida?
Well, I think success is multifaceted. And most importantly, we look at whether our students are performing academically. At that State of State, the governor was able to announce the highest graduation rate in the state of Florida at 92.2%. That is the direct result of so many of these education reforms that the governor has championed, where we have put students first, where we have focused on merit, where we have focused on achievement. All students are benefiting as a result. Our African American students are up 3.9 percentage points from the prior year in graduation rates. Hispanic students are up over 2%. Students with disabilities are up over 2%. And economically disadvantaged students are up over 3%. We are not watering down the standards either, because I saw a couple articles that said that. But the reality is, anybody who knows anything about Florida knows that we continue to create robust, rigorous standards. We continue to elevate our cut scores for our statewide tests to ensure that students are performing better and better. And so when you elevate those cut scores, it's actually harder for a student to demonstrate proficiency. We did that. And even though we elevated those scores, students rose to the occasion. And now we have the highest graduation rate in our state's history. That is one of many accolades that we are able to tout as a state as it relates to increased performance. And so that's how we measure ourselves as it relates to success in education. I would say, how are our students performing academically?
Well, I'm a graduate of Orange County Public Schools in Central Florida. I went to public schools from age 4 to 17, kindergarten to 12th grade, in a terrible time in Florida's education history. This wasn't inevitable, this level of success. There was a lot of work and persistence and dedication put into elevating what students experience in all types of Florida education options. So grateful for that. Governor DeSantis signed House Bill 1, I think it was, back in 2023, which expanded Florida's Family Empowerment Scholarship and related school choice programs. To be honest, it's kind of hard to keep up with the names of things as they've shifted over the years. And so students of all incomes and backgrounds can benefit. How are they finding out about their education options? Again, there have been a number of different options over the years. We started with that Opportunity Scholarship Program that was struck down. There was the McKay Scholarship Program for students with disabilities that morphed into, I think, Gardner was its name. And then we had the Corporate Tax Credit Scholarship Program. And now we have this universal education savings account. It's a lot to keep track of. So, does the state help inform parents? How are they getting a sense of what their opportunities are?
I think the biggest sense of advertisement, if you will, is Governor DeSantis hosting press conferences, constantly beating the drum about the anecdotes that we hear, quite frankly, from parents across the state about how they're benefiting or their child is benefiting from these scholarship programs. I know there's quite a bit of media coverage that takes place when he presents that. Obviously, at the department, we always tout our rankings as it relates to educational freedom. Just last week, we were named number one again for the third year in a row by ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and education freedom. These are rankings we pride ourselves on. The Heritage Foundation, several years in a row, has also said we're number one in educational freedom. The Parent Power Index has also said we're number one as it relates to supporting our parents. And so these are things that we are constantly putting out there into the ether. We're making sure that we're sending communications to parents. Something that was, I guess, new when I took over as the Commissioner of Education is we provided the parents a memo on day one back in July 14th of 25, communicating their rights as parents. You know, it's not often that a state's Commissioner of Education is empowering parents so much so that they are getting direct communication from the commissioner, where they're reminded of some of these pieces of legislation that have been championed over the years and the power that they have as a parent to determine the best educational option for their child.
I've seen images of the banners celebrating that number one status hanging in the Florida Department of Education building, and proud of you guys. Again, I was there almost 2 decades ago, so it's exciting to see what's happened, and it should be celebrated. What do you think are some of the threats or challenges that await Florida in maintaining that number one status?
Sure. Well, the program's always going to be attacked. I mean, we saw that this year there was an audit that was taking place as a state where the program was attacked because there were students that were actually being serviced by the public school. And so I think there were the dollars that were following the student towards a private scholarship. And so this audit came back and said, Florida, you can do better. You're doing a great job. But there's more to be done. And we agreed. We said, we're going to embrace this. We're going to lean in. We believe in accountability. And so we updated our cross-check process, made it more efficient, where we contact the district on the front end and confirm where exactly the child is going to be at so that the money is following the child, whether that's at the traditional public school, whether that's at the private school. And so we made sure that we worked through those kinks over the summer. We created greater accountability to be able to track those dollars. But we are not going to slow down in the flexibility that we are providing parents. We're not going to stop from encouraging mobility throughout the school year. If a child is struggling at one school and a parent thinks that there's a better option at a different school or at a different educational program, we want those parents to feel as though that change could be made before it is too late.
Well, you're in a legislative session right now. Sometimes well-meaning legislators might think, well, there was an audit, there were problems, we need to fix it legislatively. So how do you respond to that perception?
I think the governor in his recommended budget did come up with a recommendation that could potentially help address this, and that is moving the scholarship dollars below the FEFP line. The way education is generally funded, it's through the FEFP, and right now you have the same pot of money that's funding the traditional public school as well as the choice students. And so if you were to separate those dollars and they don't mix, there's no overlap, then I think that would add to greater protection of that pot of money, in addition to some of the accountability metrics that we've already undertaken here at the Florida Department of Education. So I think that the governor's open to tweaking the program. He has said, and I've said it all the time, while we are number one in education, we don't rest on our laurels. We continue to build year after year. Look at our legislation as it relates to school safety. Florida leads the nation when it comes to school safety legislation and ensuring that we are protecting the health, safety, and well-being of our students. Yet, year after year, we have built on our school safety legislation to ensure that we are providing all opportunities possible to protect our students, whether that's at the K-12 level, whether that's at private schools. Now we have the Guardian program at private schools, the Guardian programs now at preschools. This year, the governor is recommending expanding the Guardian program at our colleges and our universities. And so thinking outside the box, making sure that while we continue to lead, we still are able to address needs of our students and needs of those that are in our education system each year through legislation, and not just resting because we've been found to be number one in almost every metric that's out there.
I'd love to know lessons from Florida's school choice education freedom experience that you think would be relevant for other states, because you've been a leader these 2+ decades, and then particularly in the last 5 years or so with this incredible expansion, and other states are hoping to catch up. So, do you have advice for them?
Yes, I think the first thing is to be unwavering in your dedication to putting students first. There's going to be criticism. I joke with the staff every 6 months. I guarantee you there's going to be some narrative that's going to be spun either by the media or by the teachers union. And the reality is, as long as we are focused on giving students a high quality education, make that your North Star. If you pursue that and ignore the noise, I assure you students will benefit. And so you are going to see, as school choice is expanded to the point of universal school choice, we're still dealing with it here in the state of Florida with respect to attacks on the program. The union is often saying that now these choice programs, I think this is the biggest takeaway, are to the detriment of the public school system. That couldn't be further from the truth. Competition drives a better product. And I talked about those graduation rates, but we're seeing the proficiency numbers are also increasing across the board. We talked about our progress monitoring results last summer, where we were at 64% A and B schools last year in the public school system. We're now at 71%, and with charter schools, we're at 77% A and B schools. That those numbers are huge. The fact that we've increased to be on proficient on grade level in English and math from the inception of progress monitoring to where we're at now. It's about 100,000 students who are now on grade level over the past couple of years, 100 in English, about 115,000 in math. You're talking hundreds of thousands of students that are now benefiting as a result of progress monitoring, as a result of school choice, and creating a better product in the classroom. And so you're going to get attacked, you're going to receive criticisms, but as long as your focus is on students first and ensuring that they're excelling academically, that we're providing them a safe learning environment, you're going to see that parents across the state are going to be eternally thankful. That is where you achieve success on education policy, is when you start seeing the results. And so whether it's the graduation rates, whether it's how students are performing in both English and mathematics and those increases, just this year we announced at the halfway point, we're already seeing our students are performing better this year at the same time than where they were at last year at the same time. So even this year we're having successes. And so we are encouraged by those results, and we're going to continue to put students first because of it.
Well, you're certainly right that the media and the teachers unions have a narrative that they drive, and they drive hard. Back in my day under Governor Bush, it was the Palm Beach Post, obsessed with tackling the school choice programs from every angle. It seems like in more recent years, the Orlando Sentinel has had some version of DeSantis derangement syndrome and is really gung-ho about taking down education freedom options for families. I'm sure there are other papers across the states. And of course, there's always the union. So because this is a nationwide phenomenon, I often ask my guests to tackle the school choice myth that bothers them the most. And you've been doing that throughout our conversation. I'm wondering if maybe there are a couple more that you might want to tackle today.
Sure. Look, I just think it's important that folks understand I am the proud product of the public education system. And so to say that, there are articles out there that I trash public schools. No, I'm hard on public schools because I believe in accountability. And I believe in accountability across the board. And so you're going to see, like I said, practices here at the Florida Department of Education that we have, made sure to increase that. But to say that now the public school system is going to be defunded, or students are going to now perform worse as a result of school choice, it's a total myth. Both of those are total myths. We are seeing that our public school students are doing better. The governor is continued to do record funding for our teachers in the public school system. To this point, he's done nearly $6 billion in funding for teacher pay increases. This year alone, he's recommending $1.56 billion, which is an increase of $200 million from the year before. So just because we're pro school choice does not mean that we are now anti public school. It couldn't be farther from the truth. And so many of these metrics that I talked about today are the reflection of the hard work of these public school teachers and the success of these public school students. So I want folks to understand we measure ourselves in large part to how public school students perform, how these public school programs are thriving. And so we want to ensure that we are providing all educational opportunities to families across the state so that they can decide what best meets their child's individualized needs.
Well, states across the country, well, I'd say districts across the country are facing a demographic cliff. There just weren't as many babies born after 2008, and districts have put off decisions when it comes to adjusting their budgets and adjusting which schools are open and which one are not, because they had a stopgap of federal supplemental funding during the COVID eras. They can't ignore that anymore. There is declining enrollment across the nation. Is Florida experiencing that when it comes to the demographic cliff, or the fact that so many people have moved there offset that?
No, we've seen it across the state where there has been decreases in enrollment, and that is a big part of why there's been legislation championed by this governor and by our legislature to provide greater efficiencies. Co-location is a new piece of legislation being implemented in the next couple years, and ensuring that where you have half empty buildings, for example, how are we able to utilize that space in a manner that will benefit other students, like charter school students, wanting to come in there and ensure that they're also receiving an education. You know, in our minds, if you're going to fully fund a building that's half empty, it seems like an inefficient use of the taxpayer dollars. And so we've created greater flexibilities even in that context so that all educational space that's out there is able to be utilized towards instruction of students.
I just want listeners to be really clear when we're talking about declining enrollment in this context. Again, not as many babies have been born each year since 2008. There is a real demographic cliff out there. So opponents will blame everything on quote unquote vouchers, but there's a number of different dynamics at play. And it's really important for policymakers to be smart and not just react to whatever the talking point that the union is putting out there. So great to hear that thoughtful policymaking is happening in Florida. As we wrap up, I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about how Florida has also been a leader in strengthening parental rights. There was the Parental Rights and Education Act signed back in 2022. It seems like, again, the media and the unions flipped out and misrepresented what that was. I'd love for you to address kind of what the governor's thinking has been around parental rights and what the state has been doing on that front.
Yeah, look, I appreciate the governor making sure that he is a voice for those who are often overlooked. I talked about my mother being, kind of the low income single mom of three kids who was fighting for her children to have the best educational opportunities, but she's one of so many. And it was a popular movement when we created greater protections for parents to be fully informed on what was going on in schools. I think during COVID, parents were seeing for the first time during remote learning, as Florida, even we were impacted that last month and a half of school. All the districts had switched to remote learning to finish out the school year, and parents were able to hear for the first time what their students were being taught, what the teachers were saying in the classroom, things that oftentimes were brought to our attention as parents thinking it was inappropriate for a child to be exposed to. And so a lot of the legislation that has been passed has been to provide parents insight and transparency into what's going on in the classroom, requiring parental consent for all kinds of sensitive areas that a parent would want to not just be informed on, but have to make the final decision on as it relates to what their child is being exposed to. And so that legislation proved to be monumental. You have seen that parents here in the state of Florida, because of this legislation, that kind of changed turned the tables a little bit and said, as a parent, I don't have to be just told on the back end what you've been doing with my child. I get to know on the front end what exactly my child is being exposed to, and I have the ability to make a decision on whether or not I want my child to be exposed to that, or do I want my child to receive, the traditional public instruction versus a charter instruction versus we're seeing a growing movement now with classical schools. That's very popular with our parents. And because of the legislation championed by this governor and by this legislature, parents are able to utilize and explore that option and provide that opportunity for their children. And so you're seeing now more than ever, parents in the state of Florida feel not just like they're being heard, but they are empowered to make sure that they are fully a decision maker on how their children are going to learn in the state. And that's a really good thing.
Folks might not know that the Commissioner of Education position in Florida is an appointed position. You do have another year in office. So final question, what are your priorities for the rest of this year?
Well, I've said from day one, academic excellence and student safety. We will not rest on our laurels. We are doing a great job, as reflected by so many of the metrics out there. But I think we can do better. I think we can continue to see our students excel academically and continue to come up with ways to provide greater math interventions, to be able to capture where the student is struggling earlier and earlier on, to be able to help them get on the right track. That was a big part of the push with progress monitoring. And so as we continue to implement the progress monitoring program, it's only been around for a couple of years. I think we're going to see greater and greater efficiencies, creating a conducive learning environment where, yes, we are very pro-parent, but we are also very pro-teacher. And we want the parent and the teacher to be on the same page, working together so that the child is succeeding academically. It doesn't need to be combative, that relationship. We actually want to foster one where they're working together, and we're encouraging more communication between parents and teachers, because we know that the teachers do a great job from bell to bell, and then the parents get the child and have to work with their child on what they've learned during the during the school day. And so we want to make sure that those practices and that instruction is being reinforced in the household, and we want to make sure that we are building on our school safety legislation. We've done a great job from pre-K all the way to 12th grade, but I think there's more we can do in higher education. Obviously, many of us were impacted by the shooting that took place at Florida State University last year, and so we want to make sure that we are providing as safe of a learning environment for our post-secondary students as well. And so we're committed to achieving that this legislative session.
Well, Commissioner Kamoutsas, thank you for your commitment to education freedom and parental rights. Thank you for joining Freedom to Learn.
Thank you. Have a blessed one.
Freedom to Learn is a production of the Defense of Freedom Institute. Learn more about our work at dfipolicy.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Send feedback, questions, and episode ideas to podcast@dfipolicy.org. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please follow and review Freedom to Learn on your favorite podcast app and share it with a friend.